What do Warren Buffett, Oprah Winfrey, and Mark Cuban have in common? Of course, they're very successful. However, there's something else there. You know, if you look at Warren Buffett, he's known as the Oracle of Omaha. Is that knowledge what he relies on as really being a differentiator? I don't think so. The one thing that all three of these individuals point to is relationships. Building solid relationships in their personal lives, their professional lives, and using those relationships mutually beneficially to grow. So if you're struggling with how to grow your business or improve in the professional world, in this video, you're gonna learn 4 foundational pillars of success. And folks, I understand that tripods are important, but today we're making a table. And I'll tell you, we need 4 legs on that table. And I really encourage you to think about how the 4 work together to provide that foundation. Whenever my partner and I were founding the company, there was a discussion about what the name was going to be. We're based in the Midwest, and my first idea, I'll take the credit or the blame for this one, was something along the lines of Midwest Manufacturing Acquisition Company or something like that. Very descriptive because we're based in the Midwest. We were trying to acquire a manufacturing company. I mentioned that to a few people and wow, did I get some blank stares and some, yeah, that's an interesting name, Nick. After that universally poor response, I started to think about, what might be a more meaningful name. And for my partner and I realized that we were both very principle-centered people. And we started to think about what were some of the core principles that we stood for. And I think through that process, we identified, 12, 15, maybe different principles that were really important to us. And we started to distill those and think about which of those were in fact the most important to us. We narrowed those down to the 4 that remain, and those are what we view as 4 pillars that are the foundation for success. Now, I agree, not everyone is going to share the belief that these are the 4 that are most important, and I get that. For every person, I think you need to have your principles and your own concepts of what you need to stay true to in order to be successful. I do think these are important, and some of them are universal, perhaps not all of them. The first pillar, and the one that I mentioned the most, is always relationships as a cornerstone for success. I've mentioned this before on some of the other videos we've done. It's really just something that we talk about almost on a daily basis here at 4 Pillars. It's all about what are we doing to strengthen the relationship. Sometimes that relationship that we're trying to build is with a seller. Sometimes it's with an advisor. Sometimes it's with an attorney. Regardless, we're making a conscious and almost continual effort to build a relationship. In the M&A world, it really can be quite transactional. So often you are literally sitting across the table from somebody trying to agree on certain points. And as much as we would like to take a optimistic view on things about how it's not a zero-sum game and how if we just work together, 1 + 1 will equal 3. Well, a lot of circumstances in M&A, it just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. There are absolutely 100% topics and concepts within an M&A transaction where the buyer benefits and the seller is harmed, or vice versa. If you fail to take a relationship-first approach, our experience is that it's very difficult to have a conversation or let's call it what it is, a negotiation about some of those points, because you're having a conversation with somebody that's out there, purely trying to maximize his own self-interest, which is perfectly fine. We want to get to know the person that we're talking to. We really want to understand the goals and the aims. I think there are a lot of benefits to that. Sometimes you think that you guys want dissimilar aims, but really you don't. It's, I didn't know how to express myself, and so I thought I should try to achieve this goal, when really there's a more creative situation that works for everybody. Regardless though, what I found is that whenever I really get to know the person, whenever I've made an effort to understand what's important and why, it doesn't really devolve into a situation where it's, I don't care what that guy gets on this transaction. What I'm asking for is fair. I'm gonna draw my line in the sand, whatever. You don't get there. It's easy to get there, but if you know the person, if you have an appreciation for the person, it's harder to get there because you don't want to be so one-sided. I've been in circumstances where there's a point of contention maybe around how long the seller is expecting to stick around post-close. Maybe in one of the agreements, we indicate that we want the seller to commit to at least 6 months or at least 12 months or something along those lines post-close that the seller will maintain a tie to the business, and he'll be compensated for that, of course. And there's pushback. We start to kind of get adversarial. It's like, well, why can't you why won't you agree to 12 months? I mean, that's ridiculous. In that situation, I really had to step back, because I remember from earlier conversations, whenever we were getting to know each other, we were maybe eating lunch or sharing a dinner together, that this particular owner indicated that he'd like to stick around for 3 to 4 years. At first, I completely forgot about that conversation, but then once I remembered it, I just said, listen, Joe, or whatever his name was, I remember talking to you earlier, and you said that you wanted to stick around for at least 3 to 4 years. Why is this such a source of contention for you? And what it came down to is he just really didn't like to be tied down and didn't want the commitment there in writing. And once I understood that and we talked through it, it's like, Joe, do you have your views changed? Like, we've been doing this for a while. Like, now do you only want to stick around for 6 months or whatever that number was? And it's like, no, I'm really excited about the energy you bring, the ideas for growth, et cetera, et cetera. And so, even though neither one of us was able to get exactly what we wanted on that point, because there was the personal relationship there, we were able to get past our differences and end up in a situation where we were both comfortable. Now, I call myself the most boring guy in private equity, especially when you hear what our second pillar is, because it's actually quite exciting. It's challenge the status quo. Okay, now maybe it's not super exciting, but compared to relationship building, challenge the status quo has connotations of revolt and revolution, and that's kind of exciting, right? Well, that's not really the kind of challenge the status quo that we have in mind. Might not be quite that exciting, but it still works. I will tell many business owners that we are not out to change just for the sake of change. I despise that, actually. When you look at my personality, I certainly am the type of person that is more comfortable with change than averse to it. But again, I'm not just gonna paint the walls blue just because there's a new sheriff in town, so to speak. What you hear often in businesses is not so much, well, we do it this way because that's the way we've always done it. Many people in the business world realize that that's kind of a quote unquote wrong answer. So what we hear more often, these days is, well, I don't know why we do it that way, but that's how we do it. Even in those circumstances, just because the person that we're talking to doesn't understand why it's being done that way, doesn't mean the process needs to be changed. That's the type of process that we will spend more time evaluating as one that might be an area for change. Ignoring situations like that, the real reason why challenge the status quo is one of our pillars is because we are always, with any of our portfolios, going to pursue growth. And our view is that you can't pursue growth by doing the same things over and over. I guess if you're already in a high growth company and you're just on a trajectory that's, going towards the moon, then sure, maybe you should do exactly the status quo because it's working for you. Most of the businesses that we work with are a little bit boring. I mean, 4 pillars, I would consider that to be a somewhat boring company. So certainly not trying to be critical there. You're really talking more about the stage within the business cycle that the company is that we're targeting. Because it's typically in that maturity stage, that's why we feel like it's the most opportune time to challenge the status quo, reset expectations about what success is, clearly communicate what success is. Is it growing revenue 5%? Is it growing revenue 100%? Is it growing cash flow? Is it adding customers? Clearly identify what our goals or definition of success is and aligning the team to help achieve those. On to the next pillar, servant leadership. I think a lot of people, to the 2 or 3 that are watching right now, excluding my mom, of course, will definitely have different definitions of what servant leadership is. How we think about it at 4 Pillars is really about focusing not on yourself, but focusing on others, focusing on the business, and putting other people and the business or the goal or whatever above yourself. Now, I'm not gonna be so naive to think that people are just going to abandon their self-interest and only do what's best for their colleague or coworker or the company or anything along those lines. Not at all. We think about it and try to make a situation where the success of the individual is perfectly aligned with the success of the company. We make an effort to get it to where the alignment is greater than it would have been otherwise. In this day and age, it seems very common where it's all about what the individual can do to achieve success and personal attributes, personal success tips and whatnot. I know that people need to pursue their own self-interest. It's human nature. It's always going to be that way, and I'm not going to try to fight it. However, it's really refreshing whenever you're in a meeting or whatever, and you can tell that the people that are taking a personal interest in you, they're talking about how your skill sets can be expanded, how you can be given more responsibility, allowing you to flower within the organization, as opposed to just hearing about, okay, we want you to do this task and that task, and the deadline is then, go do that. And oh, by the way, if you do a really good job, then I'm gonna get a pat on the back. And that's the last thing that we're trying to achieve. My view in particular, is that I don't want to tout my own successes. Instead, what I want to point to is that the people on my team have been successful. If I can say that Joe, Mary, and whoever did a great job on this report, here's the report, and my boss or whoever says, that's a really great report. I mean, the first thing I want to say is, I agree, we really need to give Joe and Mary the credit for that. That's like a dream scenario to be in that position. It's helpful for Joe and Mary, but also it actually is helpful for me, because in the end, I'm not going to get promoted if there isn't somebody to take my shoes or to fill my shoes. And if I can do a good job communicating to my boss, whoever that might be, that Joe and Mary are really doing the work, then I've made the case that there's the potential for one of those two to move up. The reason why I offer that is to show that, even whenever you are really trying to help the development of others, you are still able to at least partially pursue your own self-interest. And again, I make that comment purely to show that I'm not just some naive guy out there saying, only worry about others, forget about yourself, and everything will work out in the end. That's the case, but I do think that you can be more successful by helping increase the success of those around you. The last pillar is persistence. I think Winston Churchill says it best when he said, success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. I'll be honest with you guys, or maybe it's just, guy or gal at this point, because I only have one viewer now. There has been a lot of failure in my career. Not only my career, I ran for certain elections and didn't get elected. After high school, didn't get into the colleges I applied to. When in college, didn't get some of the achievements that I sought to. Didn't get the jobs after college, didn't get into the grad schools I wanted, didn't get some of the jobs that I applied for, et cetera, et cetera. Really just a lot of failure. And in addition to just making you a stronger person, it's really taught me that if you want to succeed, it's not about taking one swing and hitting the ball with that one swing. It's more about building up yourself as a person so that you understand that it's going to take a lot of swings, and actually not just swings, it's going to take a lot of misses. Once you do hit the ball, great. I mean, that's a good first step, but that first hit is probably not going to be a home run, or it's not going to be all that you need to set yourself up for a career of success. In our business, I can't even count how many times I hear the word no.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
From business owners that aren't interested to selling, to capital providers that we work with that aren't interested in investing any additional capital, to various service providers, et cetera, et cetera. I hear no so much.
No!
I don't want to say that I'm immune to it. I have built up a tough shell and have learned not to take it personally. If I weren't able to do that, I guarantee you 4 pillars would not be around today. I can't say that I think persistence is the most important of the 4 pillars. However, I can say that if there's one pillar that we're missing, and if it were missing, the company wouldn't be around today, it's persistence. I'm sure you've heard the phrase or the quote or the question, what's more important, the journey or the destination? And some days I can understand one versus the other, and some days I'll take a more contrarian view. But really, I think usually it's probably not an either or, it's more of an and, or it's more of a sliding scale. Early on, whenever my partner and I were launching the company, we started talking about what our definition of success was. Very early on, we were consistent with what our views were. It was a Ferrari, a Rolex, Treehouse, no, I'm just joking. Those material items did not come up at all. It was really around two different concepts. The first concept was being in control of your calendar, of your schedule, whichever one you want to call it. I think many people think that if you have the title of CEO or founder, once you get to that level, you can just do whatever you want and you set your own schedule. It's true to some degree, but the demands of a CEO are very great. You have now all of a sudden, you don't just have one boss that you're reporting to, you have several different groups of bosses. You have your employees, you have your customers, you have vendors, your lender, or whoever your capital sources are, or perhaps you don't, but it's a shift in mindset because even though you don't have a person that you are directly reporting to that controls whether or not you have employment in that company, you have a new set of indirect bosses. I can't say that my partner and I are to the point where we control our own schedules because we're still working on a lot of different projects and deals and whatnot. And if a key person on that deal or a key customer or whatever calls, I'm gonna pick up that call, whether it's 7 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock at night. I've set the goal in terms of this component of what I view success is, but I still have some work to get there. The second part of our definition of success is being able to work with people that you want to. It might sound simple at first, but definitely much more so earlier in our career, we were trying to get a deal done no matter what. Like if we believed in the deal, we were gonna work hard and get that deal done, even though some of the folks that we were working with, we didn't necessarily like. It's not a situation where we were mistrustful of them or they were unethical or anything along those lines. It's just a fact of the matter is that you can have two really great people, but if they have different working styles, they might not get along in a professional setting. So I think that was more so what it was than anything else. As we have completed more transactions and tried to grow the business, we really feel like that's a key determinant or key characterization of what success is. Because you look at shows like Yellowstone, Succession that we've talked about in previous videos, in numerous instances in those shows, you see them pursuing a deal or an agreement with somebody that they don't really want to be a part of, but they just feel like they have to in order to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. And I'm not faulting them for that. But again, at the end of the day, I want to do business with people that I want to do business with, and that's why that's a key component of how I define success. My name is Nick McLean with 4 Pillars. We buy businesses with at least $20 million of revenue. If you would like to learn more about what a relationship with 4 Pillars would look like, please email me. And if you like this video and would like to see more, hit the like and subscribe.